rules that apply, and we just want to make sure that everybody's aware of them. Any questions regarding the Node well? Hopefully not. So we wait another minute and then we're going to start. So that would be
ein Note-Taker und JavaScript?
Nee, das brauchen wir auch. Das muss ich gleich fahren. Ja, absolut. Absolut.
Ja, das ist schon.
Soll ich anfangen?
Ich denke, nicht so schlecht.
Okay, so we're going to get started here. This is the ALTO for Europeans or ALTO for Americans working group, however you preferred. That's very funny. Americans always say ALTO. So I'm Jan Seedorf here. My co-chair Vijay Gobani unfortunately cannot make it, so Sebastian Kiesel has kindly agreed to help me here today. Say
hello, everyone.
I think most of you know Sebastian. He has been involved with ALTO from the very early days and is co-author of a couple of our ALTO RFCs. Yeah, so we're going to get started. We have a Java room there, and I think Vijay is hopefully going to be in the Java room. Before we're going to ask for note takers, etc., please again take note of the note well. I hope you all know it. Again, if somebody has any questions or is not aware of this, please come up. These are the rules. Please come up to the mic and ask. Hi, Spencer. These are basically the rules that apply to any IETF meeting or session. So please be aware. So before we get started, we need a note taker, or rather two. Any volunteers? Is that a yes, Lyle? Lyle, thank you very much. So we have note taker number one. Do we have an additional note taker as a backup? Spencer, do we always need two, or can we live with one?
Spencer Dawkins, in this case, the responsible area director. You need to be able to produce minutes.
Right.
So if you can do that off one and meet echo recordings, that would be awesome. And that's actually what we did for TSV area the last time. So,
right. So that
could be fine.
I think we can live with one note taker. So Live, thank you very much for taking notes and minutes. Just send them to the chairs after the meeting. Otherwise, we will remind you. At JavaScript, can anybody help? Mainly the things to the Java channel, but also if somebody wants to speak up, you can go to the mic and relay a message for them. Anybody willing to do that? Who's on Java here? Sabine, you're on Java. No? Piotr? Anybody? Sebastian, you can. So Sebastian can watch the Java channel here.
Yeah,
okay.
I will watch the Java channel.
Okay, so let's get started with the agenda. So we have a very packed agenda. We updated it. So I hope everybody's aware that you have 10 minutes. We have a mixture of chartered items and a couple of new proposals. Obviously, for the discussion, we give a little bit more preference to the chartered items. So if it's a chartered items and there is something to be discussed, how to move forward with the document, we as chair relax more the time. But please, everybody be aware we have a packed agenda, so try to stick within your time frame, and we will try to remind you. So the first thing, we had a very good interoperability event last night. So here you see people participating. You see the team at Yale University. Richard Yang, he couldn't make it here, so they participated remotely. We had a Skype channel where we were chatting a lot. I took a screenshot on my iPhone on all the chats that were going on back and forth and all the test cases. On the left, you see us here in Prague, the team. We are very thankful for the IETF for giving us a room. We had basically two combinations of a full client Alto client and server, and one client only and one server only, and we executed 69 test cases that are based on a draft from Wendy that I think you've all seen on the mailing list. And we were very happy that essentially everything went quite well, and we didn't find any what we call protocol level bugs, in the sense that we didn't find anything that there's an ambiguity in anything that RFC 7285 says. So that was very good. We did, however, the implementations did find a couple of minor implementation level bugs, but that was supposed to be expected, because this is as a reminder also for everybody, this was the first interop we've had since the publication of RFC 7285. So this is basically has been the first interop based on the final ALTO protocol specification. Things we found were things like capitalization or CIDR interpretation things, and immediately the implementers got together and exchanged and inside they were also very happy. He said that we had a Skype chat plus a Skype voice conversation on all the time, so we were talking back and forth. Anybody who participated last night want to come to the mic and say anything else? Did I forget anything? Okay, that's not the case, so let's move on. So maybe to summarize, we were so everybody in the room yesterday thought this was a good event and we should do it again. So a proposal from Richard Young has been to maybe also do it remotely, frequently, whatever frequently means. But obviously we can also, anytime we as chairs, I talked to Vijay about it, we are happy to host it again at any, co-located with any IETF meetings like we did yesterday. So that's a possibility as well. So I think this worked out quite well. I repeat what I said also yesterday. We as chairs, we like to do this again. Just come, say it on the mailing list, and we make it happen. So we are more the facilitators. It's up to you to organize it, but I think it went very well. When he wrote a draft with test cases and the tests, and also many people, I would like to thank all the people who helped with the interop yesterday. And I think it went quite smoothly, I would say. Here's another slide. So we had a website where basically dynamically we updated with the results of the test. So here you see just a snapshot of what was going on. We had all the servers and clients and the test cases that failed. And then if you would, you cannot do it obviously here on the PDF, but if you would click on the result link, you would see all the details. And that's what we basically did yesterday. And people looked at the details and then talked to each other. Why is this not the way it's supposed to be, or things like that. Yes, so if we look, so Vijay and we looked at the milestones, and surprise, surprise, we are a little bit behind our charter milestone dates. Luckily, we are not the only IETF working group for which this is the case. So we do feel guilty and bad, but maybe not as bad as good. Yes, we do. But I'm still smiling, as you can see. So what we discussed is we will talk to the ADs after the Prague IETF to see how we can address it. Having said all that, I think we're making good progress on all the charter items. So for each of them, we have quite mature drafts, and this is going to be one of the things we discussed today here in the meeting. So we do have very, very mature proposals for all the chartered items. So we are not really worried that we cannot get there. It's just, the milestones might have been too ambitious. So the first one actually is the deployment considerations document, and this is just a reminder, we don't have a presentation on this today. So we had a working group last call, and then Wendy, thank you again, Wendy provided a review, and the authors have addressed all the review comments and provided another update, the 012 version, the 12th version released on June. And now basically we and Vijay has agreed to do that, need to complete the Shepherd write-up, and then this document can move on to the IESG for publication. So that's basically just a status update. I don't think there are any comments. If there are, come to the mic now. But I think this has been pretty clear. Another document we have, which is not being presented today, is the server-side notifications document, which solves multiple of our charter items. And we had adopted as working group item on the mailing list after the last IETF. And there has been, basically an update from Wendy on this document that now it's IETF ALTO incremental update SSE. So we think, so this is now a personal opinion, I think this is quite a mature document and actually solves the issues that we have, or the requirements from the charter. So the question is how to move on with this document. Since it's a working group item, we would like to remind the working group to read the document and provide feedback to the authors how to improve it. Wendy actually made 2-3 slides on the status of the document. If we have time in the end, we will go over them. But for me, the main point is, you know, being a working group document doesn't mean, okay, now we're done and we can just let it sit there. It actually means now the working group needs to review it and provide comments to the authors. The authors came to me and say they think it's quite good and ready. Actually, Richard Young also told me he thinks this is, you know, very, very mature. So it's up to the working group to actually provide comments and feedback. So we would encourage you to do that. If you have any comments right now, please come to the mic. I don't think that's the case. Okay. Multi-cost is another charter item, and that has been adopted. And we have a working group item there now since May. We just would like to make the working group aware that there has been an IPR declaration on this document. So if you're familiar with the IETF IPR rules, that is a normal process. If you have IPR as an author, you must declare it, and here the authors did so. So everything is according to the procedure. We would just like to make the working group aware that there has been such a declaration. So please have a look, and if you have comments, discuss it on the mailing list. Spencer, correct me if I say anything wrong, but from my understanding, the whole IPR policy of the IETF is all about transparency. So we want to make that's as transparent as possible. Remind the working group that we have this IPR declaration, and please comment anything you want on the mailing list regarding this.
And just to confirm, because it is important, as long as the working group knows what they're looking at, the IETF does not take a position on IPR. We take a position on the unawareness of IPR.
Yes, thank you for the clarification. I was trying to say the same thing. So there's nothing wrong with somebody having IPR and disclosing it, right? That's actually what we want people to do. So have a look, and if you have any comments, please post them on the mailing list or in any other way. Okay, so this is one of the other chartered items. So for alternative server discovery, we actually have, to our knowledge, only one candidate here, which is the document that Sebastian will present later on. So I will not talk about it much more. So we have one candidate here, and maybe today we can decide how the working group sees this candidate. Again, I don't think there are any others at this point, so maybe we should decide how to move on. Now is one of the charter items where we actually have two documents, and I said this last time at the IETF. Obviously, we must come to a we must move forward in a way that sooner or later we only have one document, whatever that means. That can mean that we have a merger. That can mean that, you know, the working group decides on one of them. I encourage the authors to get together. So both drafts have presentation time today. So this is one of the items where I will allow more discussion time, and where I'm also, or we as the chairs, are really curious what the working group thinks. So here we clearly, this is one of the, actually this is the only, to my knowledge at this point in time, this is the only working group, so the only chartered item where we have two competing documents at this stage. At least at the agenda today. So yeah, Vijay actually made these slides, so I think he phrased it very well. So the working group needs to understand the distinction between the two drafts, and then we need to decide how to move forward. So this concludes my chair slides. Is there any, I put up the agenda again, is there any agenda bashing? I don't think that's the case. So we have the first presentation from Piotr on inter-alto communication problem, which is something you have presented some time ago already. I just reviewed it.
For the first time in Maastricht.
Maastricht, right. So let's see if I can find your slides. So you are this one, right?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Next slide. This is a communication, inter-alto communication problem statement, because we'd like to split work on this topic into multiple documents so that it will be working. We don't want to have a 100-page document that's specifying something. We don't know if it's really useful, for example, for somebody. Okay, formally it's an update, but the previous document was in Quebec City. So 4 years ago, this document is rewritten from scratch, mainly just because 4 years ago everybody thought that Alto is mainly about peer-to-peer networks, while now we see totally different use cases. So we try to be very, very, very generic. And there was 11 use cases in that document. It was really confusing in my opinion. Now there are true use cases, 3 use cases, remote view of topology, detailed information on remote topology, and partitioned networks, which somehow include those 2 previous ones. So next slide. Next slide, please.
Yes. This one
Okay.
again?
Yeah.
One more. Okay.
No, the previous. Yeah, this one. Yeah. So the general architecture of inter-alto is that we have some local part, because we say about communication between two administrative domains. It may be SS, it may be another somehow disjoint parties. The site that applies policy to topology information is called the local one, and the others are remote ones. So we have some topology information sources which we cannot access because they contain private data to the remote ones, but inter-alto can help somehow to gather aggregated extract of information on the remote view of topology. So next, the first use case is generalization of routing asymmetry, and the main reason for that use case is that, as probably all of you know, you are perfectly aware of upstream paths because you have BGP and so on, but generally you do not know anything about downstream paths. But there might be a use case in which most of the traffic you want to optimize goes into your network, not out of your network. But this information is available to remote parties. We just would like to have an option to gather those information. And generally, we use Alto if cost of transferring data between 2 endpoints depend on the path. If not, then I don't see a use case for Alto. It's easy to calculate cost of sending data to any given endpoint, but it's not so easy to calculate cost of receiving data from a given endpoint. So this is one of the most important use cases for us. Next slide, please. The another one is detailed information on remote topology, which is generalized version of remote ISP's preference. So we called it 4 years ago. Aggregation has a lot of information. Even though you can see 2 prefixes for some subnets, you cannot distinguish if they follow the same path, if they have the same communities and so on. You cannot say anything about connectivity to those 2 sets of addresses. So a remote party can somehow send information that a given subnet is preferred or not, for example, and so on. So we provide more detailed information on their topology, of course, without revealing too much information. I do not say that we should merge all IGP networks into one. And next slide. And the third generic use case is about partitioned networks, probably run by the same organization. So we have a lot of trust, and we can exchange a lot of information, but it's hard to do it somehow within the framework of routing protocols. So if Alto is to be used in such networks, some networks may send another network, another segment, another partitions network information about topology. In the hierarchical case, there might separate mixture between just those types. It doesn't matter, but then we can share information about topology between those disjoint partitions. Okay, next slide. Of course, this brings a lot of security issues. We may exchange sensitive data, very sensitive data. So, there might be a requirement not to redistribute direct information. Those information gathered from remote parties may be, for example, used to calculate cost, but it should not be forwarded as it was received. It may, of course, require formal agreement and so on and so on. But also, this constraint on security bring an advantage that you, if you have to implement such a communication, you have to implement two disjoint communication security contexts, so it may be easy to handle it. This document for me and for a few other people seems to be a pretty stable. It's not stable because it was written from scratch, but it seems to be a pretty mature. I don't know if you are interested in adopting a WG item or not, even though it's not in a charter. But I have received some.
As chair, Jan Seedorf here, I don't think we can adopt a working group item that's not chartered, or at least not. I wouldn't do that right now. I don't even know if we can, but in any case, I don't think that's a good idea.
So first of all, should appear in the charter, yeah. Yeah.
So that's always an option. So the way, if you want to move this forward, the way would be to ask the working group for feedback, which you are doing right now. So maybe I stop now, but I want to stop the discussion. If you come to the mic, maybe. Working group, let's go.
Sebastian Kiesel speaking as an individual. So I think this is really important work. Alto was currently too much focused on, say, single domain scenarios. So I think this work should be done. To the document, 2 comments. The one thing is, I'm not sure whether we want to go down all the path like problem statement, framework document, gap analysis, and in 5 years or so the protocol extension specification or something. So maybe we can do this shorter. If this is a pure problem statement document, there's already too much architecture inside, and I think, well, you already seem to have excluded some options that should be worth considering. So to summarize, I think the problems should be solved, but we need to think about the process.
Okay.
May I ask? Sorry, go ahead and answer.
Splitting into more than one document, it was advice from Enrico, and we met in Maastricht. But so this advice may be not valid yet.
We value Enrico's advice, but maybe it was at a different point.
Because we submitted
the other working group was at a different stage.
We have submitted then a document which was called the Inter-Alto Protocol. It was really long document.
Okay. May I ask the working group who has read the document? Okay, couple.
And I know that Richard did, but he's not attending.
Okay.
Sebastian Kiesel relaying VJ from the Jabber. The VJ says one way to move ahead if the working group interest is would be the independent stream, so an AD sponsored draft, but only if there's enough interest in the working group.
Right. So I wouldn't, that's a good point from VJ, but I would rather be interested now if the working group has interest in it. So I heard Sebastian, the others who read the document, are there, yes, come to them. Interested. Okay. So there seems to be some interest. We have to see how we move this forward. Yeah, obviously what VJ said is a valid option.
Okay.
I guess that discussion we have to do on the mailing list also in the interest of time. So the conclusion is there seems to be interest in this work, and there's also very important, there's no objection in the working group.
Yeah, now it seems that working group is ready for such a work, because 4 years ago
that may be the case.
Everybody was interested in specifying protocol.
So I would say we continue with the agenda, and we continue the discussion on how to move this forward on the mailing list, or
social, yeah.
Say again.
And during the social, yeah.
Or during the social or in private conversation with the chairs and the AD and stuff. Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much. And the next one is path extension. I will start talking. Generally, it was work with Fukuyao. Next slide, please. Generally, all of you know that there between two endpoints you have a lot of paths possible. Yeah. So next slide. But if you have, for example, a path from PID A to PID Y, you cannot ask an Alto server for providing the costs of each pair, and then sum the cost, because cost, for example, cost function for PID A, PID 1 is a cost of sending traffic originating in PID A and which destination is PID 1. But in case of core networks and so on, you cannot say that you can sum costs because traffic can be handled different if it's following a specific path. Next slide. And some of you was thinking in which cases, for example, when we have MPLS and RS and with RSVPTE or in Lisp, you may want to have some assistance in setup of path of tunnels, or in choosing a tunnel in CDNs, for example, in a case, of course, in which replication is done by forwarding data between different tiers of replica servers. We can also say that content follows some paths from an origin to end clients, and in service function chains, and a use case we might have need to get some assistance on which network functions are chosen in right order. So next slide. We introduced something we called PID, that's provided defined path ID, which is very similar to PID, but it does not contain sets of addresses, but it contains PIDs, and it's an ordered. It's a list of PIDs, and so we extend a little bit network and cost map service, of course filtering, and introduce a path computation service. Of course, everything is optional. You can choose only one service to implement, but not have to implement all of them. And next slide. Network map with PIDs looks like this, that you have, for example, path through PIDs 1, 3, and 6, For example, exactly that is through 1 and 3, and traffic is directed to page 6. So you compose it of bits that are defined, of course, in the network maps. Nesting is allowed, but circular dependencies are not allowed, of course. And next, you can use it to provide costs for sending data through given path. Of course, we do not say how to use the path. There might be a number of options. You just tag the traffic or so on. But with this extension, you can show costs from sending traffic from for example, from PID B to PID Z, using any path or best effort service, whatever it means for your network. But also you can show show costs of sending the traffic to a given endpoint through a given path. So next slide. We also extend ECS. You can ask for general costs using whatever it means, best effort service, for example, and you can ask for path following the given for costs of the traffic following the given path. Next. So you have response. I do not like definitely the encoding I proposed, but I could not think about best one. Next. And there is another service, totally new. Of course, it requires a very sophisticated Alto server, but it may be useful in some cases. Because in the previous example, you had to compute a path you want to follow and provide it to ECS, but in this case, you just provide, in this case, if the first array is one of the source, the last is one of the destination, and then you have to choose exactly. You have to pick exactly one address from each array, and then it means that you want to we want traffic to follow the given path. So next, and we are given one example of a path. Of course, I am finishing now. But thanks. So you are given a proposed paths. Of course, you can do with this information what you want, and cost of this path may be more than one for some optimization, load balancing, whatever. And next slide. So the most important question is if do you think it's useful or not? If it might be.
So comments, please.
Wendy Rowe, Alcatel-Lucent. I had a question on your costs. If you could back up a couple of slides to the first one on
Cost map, yeah.
Cost map, yeah. I was trying to. What does it mean to say that the cost from PID A to path.1-2-3.z is 10?
It means that you want to send traffic from PID B. You mean this with
from PID A to
you mean from PID to A to?
I think Wendy's talking about this.
For the first one, yeah. Okay.
That one.
So it means that you would like to get cost. You are given cost by a cost map. You are given a cost of sending traffic which originates in PID A, then follows traffic defined by PIDs which construct the PPID path 1236Y. In my use case, it was through PID. In this example, because it's from a draft, example from a draft. So in this case, it's a traffic going through PID 1, through PID 3, through PID 6, and destined to PID to an endpoint in PID Y. And
okay. Well, I guess what I don't understand is is that the same as sending from PID A to PID Y?
But if you send it through a given path, the cost might be totally different. Cost is very generic thing. Yeah, it is. It might be routing cost, monetary cost, but it may somehow.
Maybe I can help. So when if you look at the 3 lines below that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go from PID A to PID Z, you have 3 different paths here, and depending on what path you choose, you would have a different overall cost. That's the whole point of your approach.
Okay.
Whether that's something we want to do, and whether this encoding of a PID name with a hyphen is what we want to have is, of course, something to be discussed. I'm just trying to explain.
Regarding coding, I just it is path and the dot is something I specified, but then it's just a bunch of letters.
I think maybe we should discuss it offline, because I'm not quite sure what's going on, but this is going to take too long to do it here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's a good feedback, so probably deserves a bit more discussion. And
every feedback is good.
Yes.
Lyle Bird, Sprint. Just to answer the chair's question, yeah, I think there's actual value in understanding the paths and the individual cost, and that the summary that's provided by the cost map, although good, will at some point come into question by an operator or an operations team. So having this level of detail or being able to express it is useful. I'm hoping we never have to get to this level of detail all the time in an operational scenario, but being able to at least draw it out at some point is going to be of some value.
Actually, I'm surprised, because I was thinking you as an operator might say, I don't want to disclose all these details, but that I don't,
He wants to use it internally.
I can tell you that operations personnel within my organization will definitely want to use it internally. And when there's a dispute between partners,
internal use is a good thing. Yeah, that's a good example, good use case.
And this actually would be representative between 2 partners in troubleshooting as well, where there's a discrepancy, we see one value, they see another. This would be a great way for us to understand. The one thing I would note was it would be slightly helpful if your actual values up above for PID Y and PID Z actually had some correlation to the values down below in the paths. Might be a little bit
just an example.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
Hi, Bing Song. I also think this work is very valuable, is very useful, and there are different passes between 2 endpoints, and then it can be at different levels. For example, the folding level or the overlay level. For example, you can. There are different passes in the routing tables, or you can in the overlay level for endpoint and the server you can use different media relays, and it's at a different level. So I think we should consider that in this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I think the overall summary was there's interest in the working group, but the details need to be fleshed out a bit more, and maybe you can have the discussion with the people on the mailing list. Yeah.
Again, like in Inter-ALTO, it has to be chartered, you have to be adopted, yeah?
Yes, right. But I think here we are even further from adoption in the sense that we need more discussion.
Yeah, definitely. It's I would not bet it and say it's a major draft.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Thank you. So next is Sebastian on multiple ALTO information sources and partition knowledge. So please. You. Mm-hmm.
Hello, this is Sebastian Kiesel, University of Stuttgart, presenting joint work with Martin Stimmeling. Next, please. So this talk is related to the second but last talk from Piotr about, say some kind of multi-domain things. I'll come to this later. So where are we at the moment? We have our ALTO protocol, RFC, which basically defines the communication between an ALTO client and a single ALTO server. The protocol allows that the client can ask any question about any endpoint or path, and the protocol, at least on a syntactical level, allows the server to give any answer, but I don't know anything special about this particular host or path is a valid answer, and maybe an answer that the server will give quite often. So that's what the ALTO protocol does. We have a companion RFC which defines a DHCP-based procedure. So basically the operator of an access network can recommend one ALTO server URI to the clients in an access network. The clients could also use another one. The last bullet should be probably the first one. Back in 2008, we decided that the backend protocol running from the information sources, so the network management system or some measurement system or so, should not be standardized because there are so many different ones. So this was on purpose left implementation specific. Next, please. But now, obviously, there are multiple information sources, in particular, if you think about multi-domain, large-scale deployments. So it's just a fact. We need to deal with this somehow. Second is ALTO clients often want to optimize traffic that goes to the same node where the client is located. So we have a node, and he's interested in optimizing the traffic that goes to him, or but that's not always the case. We have seen use cases where the actual ALTO client is located somewhere in a signaling plane, not on the end point of the data transmission. So we were working on this under the name third-party discovery for quite a long time. Decided to abandon this name because its different use case was also called third-party discovery. But this is strongly related. Another thing so if you're interested in one of these use cases, see the appendix of the draft. There is one given. And the third thing to consider is even if an ALTO server knew everything, the question is, would it be willing to disclose this everything to any ALTO client in the internet? For example, there's the risk that if I'm an internet service provider and disclose past costs about a path from a foreign network to another foreign network, and I screw up their traffic engineering, I might have problems with lawyers and so on. So even if I knew the information, I might be reluctant to publish a full n times n cost matrix for the whole internet. So, and the conclusion of these three bullets is we should have some solution for having multiple ALTO servers in different administrative domains and pushing or pulling requests in between of them. Next, please. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This has been discussed over years now, and on the mailing list there were many, many ideas, so that's why I also was commenting on the second but last draft. There are many architectural options. I try to classify them. There's two approaches that assume that all ALTO servers actually have the same knowledge. So we have the problem I mentioned earlier that we probably don't want to disclose it, but still we could either do it in the back-end protocol. So the back-end protocol would have to be split into an implementation-specific part that goes to the source of the information, and then a standardized part for redistribution between the ALTO servers, and then all ALTO servers would publish the same information. So that's approach 1.1. 1.2 would be to standardize a new protocol, or maybe use the ALTO protocol for some kind of inter-ALTO server data replication. The other, the 2.1 to 2.4 approaches assume that different ALTO servers do not have the same knowledge, and then we have different options. We could either forward the request to the right one, we could fetch data. So one ALTO server could fetch data from the other one on behalf of an ALTO client, similar than DNS servers do. I remember Richard Alini was proposing that there could be something like a web search engine, Google for ALTO or something. So an engine that crawls through the web and looks for ALTO information and presents it. So this would be 2.3. Or the last approach would be that we do it on the client side. So the client would have to figure out which ALTO server to ask depending on the question it is going to ask. So these are many different options with different impacts on the need whether we need to standardize a new protocol or not. All of these approaches, of course, need some idea how to aggregate information or to compare information. In particular, if you have different network maps and different pit layouts, it's probably rather tough to merge that. Well, this also depends on the service. The endpoint property service is maybe easier than, say, merging a complete cost map if the pits are defined in different ways. So this all would have to be figured out. But what you can see in orange, one column is all but the search engine approach have one thing in common. They need a mechanism by which I can discover other auto servers. I need to learn what information is available there. And there should also, there should also be, well, some kind of authority mechanism. So not everybody should be able to publish information about any network or endpoint or so. So there should be the concept of some kind of ownership, or so that only authorized operators or whatever that means can publish information about their networks. So this would be some common requirement. Next, please. One more. Okay. So, and this is also the last slide. What our draft currently provides is a rather generic lookup mechanism. So the parameters for this mechanism is an IP address and the string ALTO. So we, as a service identifier, and the result will be the URI of an information resource directory that can give further information about this IP address. So this could be right away be used with the endpoint property service. For other services, we would have to figure out how to use this with pitmaps and so on. The algorithm is based on the DNS. There's a very similar work in the GeoPriv working group. They produced an RFC lately, 7216, list discovery, and we are also using parts of our own ALTO server discovery RFC. So basically, we are just taking parts of these two RFCs. So this would quite nicely match what is written in our charter, that we are supposed not to define a new general purpose discovery mechanism, but try to reuse existing ones. So I also have a prototype implementation of this. And as I said, this could be immediately used for a client-based server discovery. So if the client wants to ask a question about an IP address, it could use this algorithm to figure out the URI where to ask. And it could also be the basis for further work about inter-ALTO server protocols, as Piotr, for example, proposed. So that's what we have. I think the specification is now quite stable, as I said, based on two existing RFCs. So I would like to propose this, and of course it's a candidate for chartered work, so this cross-domain server discovery. And the question would now be, can this be adopted as a working group item? Thanks.
So first of all, questions to the presentation or questions to the proposed approach? Any technical questions? Who has read the latest version of this draft?
2, 3, not too many.
Not too many. So I'm asking specifically because we, of course, this is as a reminder for the working group, we have a chartered deliverable on an alternative to the base ALTO server discovery mechanism, and this seems to be the only candidate. So obviously, and Sebastian asked it here, should this be adopted? Since only a few people have read the latest version, I think we should refer that definitely to the mailing list, but we should have a discussion here if people think, I mean, according to the knowledge of the chairs, there's nobody else working on the document fulfilling this charter item. So,
sorry to interrupt. This could have several reasons why nobody's working on. Either it's just not interesting, or
of course,
maybe there's not so much expertise in this group here. So maybe an interesting question would be: what is the first line? So this general idea, an algorithm where I go into with an IP address and the string ALTO, and which delivers an URI of an IRD. Is this something that would be a useful building block for either the direct client-based discovery or also for inter-server protocols.
Right. So
maybe
comments.
Piotr can
Yeah.
comment.
So Piotr, as speaking as one of the inventors of Inter-ALTO, and generally we definitely need some discovery service, just because we assume that a client will not be able to receive any information from outside of its domain because of confidentiality and so on. So we look at the server-to-server communication, and then a server has to discover somehow other servers. Providing it manually is a crazy thing. Of course, apart of there might be some use cases in which manual configuration is the perfect one. By general, it would be nice to have some discovery mechanism. I did not consider how it has to be done. It has to be simple. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Obviously.
One comment about this table. You said that in web search, something like web search engine, you do not need discover. I think it did as well, because this search engine has to discover other servers. The client does not have to discover, but this web-based or another based search engine has to discover. So whenever you have more than one server and you do not use manual configuration, you have to.
May I comment on this? So the web search engine is a very special case compared to the other ones, because it's more like, my personal homepage. I didn't register at Google or Bing, but you can find me there. So they're just scrolling the web and take whatever they can find. So this is different than going to a DNS registry and saying, I want to register a domain name. Maybe I have even the trademark for that name, and so on. So this is, I think, the one is more hierarchical approach, the other one is like finding.
Somebody put a link on your webpage somewhere, but nobody will put a link for IRD in its own IRD, for example.
Well, I think we're drifting off. So the main point of the discussion is, do people think this is a candidate that can fulfill our charter item, and do people think this is a good approach to do anyway, Alto server discovery outside of the domain?
Wendy Rome, Alcatel-Lucent. I think something akin to a search engine might indeed be practical. Not as I certainly can't imagine something like Google running through the web trying to find Alto servers. But if you make this the assumption that someone who is running an Alto server wants the world to use it, and there may be only a few hundred of these in the world, I can imagine someone running a simple registry of all Alto servers, and someone who has an Alto server and wants it to be used would say, here's my server, please index it or tell the world about it, or just put it in a list of all available Alto servers.
Yeah, but what would be the point in adding a new registry if we can reuse the DNS? We have already a well-known rendezvous point, so why should we create another one?
Well, the question is just how complicated would that DNS be? I'm not an expert on DNS, but it did seem like you used reverse DNS, which I thought was a bit flaky or unreliable. So that's my only concern with that.
One more thing about the draft. In the appendixes, you refer to peer-to-peer use cases and so on. And I know that for many people, peer-to-peer use case is still valid, but it's so not generic that it may somehow definitely not help the draft. So I don't know if we should have it in the draft or not. I'd like to see such a draft very, very generic without any.
That's why it's in an appendix, and I think we will remove it. So it's not a statement we want to solve this specific use case. It's more like an example about an Alto client in the signaling plane. Maybe if you can propose a better example, we could switch. Okay.
So I encourage the working group to look at this document. So I don't think we can take a working group adoption hum now if only 2-3 people have read the document. It should be a little bit more, but we can certainly do that soon on the mailing list. So why don't you, Sebastian, initiate the discussion on the mailing list again and ask the working group guys, this is the only candidate we have right now. Do you think this is a reasonable one? And then again, people can comment and we can have this discussion. Okay.
Okay, thanks everyone.
So we move now. We have two presentations on endpoint properties, and what I propose is we have the presentations one after the other. But after the first presentation, maybe we only have technical or clarification questions, and then we have an overall discussion after both of the presentations on how to move forward and working group adoption, and this the whole procedural issue. So Hyben, you're first. Let's see if I can find the slides.
I will use the mic now because you are not speaking yet. I have provided a contribution. It's a bottle of Coca-Cola local drink. Everybody is welcome to try it.
So, not that one, not that one. Is it this one? No. Huh? No. Did you send it to me? Yes. Unified props is the one that Wendy will present. And do you see it here? Extended? That's the one. Yeah, yes. All right. Good. Go ahead.
This is Hyben Song presenting endpoint property extensions. Next slide. Yeah, this has been discussed for several rounds, and this time we'll provide a sentence overview and the latest revisions and discussions, and clarify the relationship between this draft and Wendy's draft. Okay, so, next slide. So this is a targeted a charter work item, and now the text becomes stable. We have a lot of input to this document, and the recent issues have already been addressed in the latest warrant. Next slide. Yeah, at the last meeting, some people asked us to avoid frequently changing information, especially this information changed in seconds. So this has already been solved in this warrant. So here are some comments from Lin Li. She's not here this time. 06 warrant updated and used. This is cellular for this endpoint may be changed, but we don't give and its access mechanism can be changed from 2G up to 3G or to 4G, but we don't give a very specific access technology here. And the next one is about the maximum bandwidth. It is also avoiding the in this warrant, and we give we only provide the provisioned bandwidth instead of the changing information of the available bandwidth. And it is will be quite difficult, and it's changing very frequently. And the last one is fast changing properties may be important for things. I don't know who that guys, but the answer is we definitely need more input if people want this in this draft. Next slide.
Yeah, maybe before you continue, just a reminder. So we had this discussion last time when, I don't know who presented this document last time. The guidance we had from the area directors when the ALTO working group was founded was that we should avoid ALTO being used for real-time congestion control, right? So you might have feedback loops and these kinds of things, control loops. So back then we were thinking it should be something that changes in the order of days or every twice a day. Now we are entering domain. We have new use cases, so we're entering a domain where maybe we can use ALTO for things that change more often. But I still that was my comment last time. I still remain we shouldn't use ALTO to convey things that change in the order of seconds or even minutes. Yeah, so just a reminder.
There is also concern from last meeting about the privacy protection, and we think privacy is an honor requirement and design. Each endpoint property will be accessed based on the application specific and property specific and operator specific requirements, and use access control to this and to it. And it also adjusts privacy protection, mapping, and access control policy configuration. There are some property definition. In property definitions, we define the privacy considerations. For example, there are access control policy from endpoint or ISP specific access control policies are use ranking instead of role description, and we use provision bandwidth. Use another. Sorry. I think there are backup slides about how to do the privacy protection to endpoint properties. Just move to the backup slides. I just want to show. Yes, here it is. I think last time we have already explained a little bit. If you don't know it, you can read the draft. Can we slide back? So a property both. The property and the subscriber and application and ISP, they combine together to determine the privacy level. So we come back to the second or third slide. And next one, okay. We also combine some properties from the NFV use case, because NFV need more fine-grained geolocation and information for the migrable working machines. So so in the geolocation property, we have the precision called DSIM, data center. The content server ID and the rack ID has already been added for the data center precision. Okay, next one. I think Lindy discussed this with Wendy on the.
Hi, Ben. Sebastian relaying Vijay again. Vijay says, in Dallas, we talked about differential privacy as an antidote to privacy concerns. Did you get a chance to look at that? I can read again. Vijay asks, in Dallas, we talked about differential privacy as antidote to privacy concerns. Did you get a chance to look at that? Maybe we should take this offline then. Okay.
So the draft Ruby auto unified properties. It's general. Key domains and presenting those properties as maps, and we think that her draft and our draft are also going to each other. When this draft proposes a new way on how to communicate endpoint properties between auto client and server, which is independent on the information that is communicated. This draft is concerned about what are the needed information to be communicated. So it is independent on the manners of communication. The potential interplay in that current version of this draft is based on the endpoint properties as defined by auto, and there is no consideration given to the property maps. For example, privacy considerations might prevent some endpoint properties to be included and retained as property map.
2 more minutes, or 1 more minute actually. Are you?
Next one. Okay, I already finished.
Okay. So as I said, maybe now any clarification questions, the procedural discussion we do after the following presentation. Are there any technical or clarification questions?
Wendy Rome, Alcatel-Lucent. I agree that this proposal is totally orthogonal to mine, and I don't see any reason why they need to be discussed together. This proposal is about new endpoint properties. My proposal is about a new way to present endpoint properties, and the two are completely independent.
So just for the notes, so both authors agree, the authors of both documents agree on this. You agree on that too, Haibin? Okay, that wasn't clear to me last time we had this discussion. So you had some you had some clarification exchange among yourselves, and you okay. That's good to know. Still, we can have the discussion afterwards. Now maybe Wendy presents, and then okay.
Sorry that I can't really look at you. I have to. It's going to be difficult to see one or the other. Maybe which one can I see better? Oh, okay. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about a new way to present properties. If I have the next slide. So what's the problem? Well, to start off with, in the beginning, we had endpoint properties, and they were good. But if you think about it, some of the properties are associated with individual endpoints, like maybe bandwidth or owner or something like that. But other properties are really associated with sets of endpoints, in particular CIDRs, things like ASNs, or the ISP that owns it, and so forth. And the endpoints in that set inherit those properties from the definition on the CIDR. This could be implemented internally, but that was not exposed at the protocol level. Furthermore, you can think of other entities that Alto might be concerned about, which also have things that look like properties. Certainly PIDs might have properties. And there's been various proposals for topology information that involve adding these things called abstract network entity elements, which are things in a path from one PID to another. Those would have properties. So it struck, and if you wanted to deal with that, we'd need a new property, a new protocol message that returns those. And it occurred to me we could unify that into one concept of properties, which could be extended to new entity domains simply by defining the entity domain without introducing any new messages. Next slide. And the second related problem is that, as defined originally, the endpoint property service was a lookup service only, post mode. You had to say, I want the endpoints for the properties for these particular sets of endpoints. There was no way to get a full map of all of the properties for all of the endpoints. And now that made sense for endpoints because theoretically there are billions and billions of them. But in reality, if you think endpoints or properties are primarily defined on CIDRs and only occasionally on individual endpoints, then there might be a finite set. And for other things like abstract network elements, there probably will be a finite set of them. So it occurred to me it made sense to make properties look like network maps and cost maps and have both a full property map that returned everything and a filtered property map which would return only things that the client selects. Next slide. So to do that, we need to be able to name entities. So the simplest way to do that is use a prefixing scheme. An entity name consists of entity domain name, a colon, and then some name that is of a format that's specific to that entity. For example, you have IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, which can include endpoints or CIDRs. You can have PID names, or you can have abstract network elements. And you'll notice that these things can form a hierarchy. The hierarchy would be defined as part of the notation for elements of that elements in that entity domain. Next slide. Okay, so we also have property naming. Well, properties are properties. I guess the point of this slide is that I think for this to be effective, there should be one common space of property names. You should not have a space of property names that's dedicated to each entity class. It'll just be lead to a combinatorial nightmare. Much easier just to define properties such that they work, such that the property definition is independent of a particular entity domain. If it doesn't make any sense for things of that entity, then you just don't attach it to things of that entity. Next slide. So the next question is, how do they relate to network maps? Well, what we did in the original protocol was for a few properties like PIDs, which are inherently associated with the network map, we qualified the property name by the resource ID of the network map. So this was what we called a resource-specific property. I propose revising that and instead when properties for entities are tied into a network map in some way, shape, or form, the association is recorded through the resource, the property map resource you use to access those properties, using the uses clause, and in a sense making it using exactly the same mechanism we use for cost maps right now. So you have a server could offer a variety of endpoint property services, or variety of property maps, which may be associated with various network maps. And if a property map uses a network map, it means all entities and properties returned through that map are associated with that map. Next slide. So this is just a quick definition of the internet address domain, which would include two prefixes, IPv4 and IPv6, and standard internet addresses as we know them, and CIDRs, which would be usable interchangeably. And there's I can't even read what that says. Yes, this would imply that there's probably each network map has its own set of endpoint address properties, and there may also be one anonymous set for that are not necessarily associated with the network map. Next slide. Okay, so we have two new property map services. This would replace the existing endpoint property service. They parallel the full and filtered cost map and network map services that we already defined for Alto. The IRD entry for each one would specify the domain classes that it can return, as IPv4, IPv6, and so forth, and the properties, and it would return in effect the cross product of those. And that means, can we have a full property map for endpoint properties? Well, not if you have billions of them defined, but if you give these entities, or too many entities to enumerate, then the server simply wouldn't offer that particular full map. Next slide.
2 minutes.
Okay. Next slide. Okay, simple example here of a couple of IRD entries. These are for full maps. And here you notice you have two of them with different sets of properties. Those could have been combined into one, but presumably the server thought that no client would be interested in both of them together and would prefer to have them separate. Next slide. Service for several different properties. Next slide. And a filtered request looks very much like a filtered endpoint or an endpoint property request. You give the endpoints you want and the properties you want, and then on the next slide, the server returns those properties. Okay, and next slide. So how would this change the current documents? Well, we would deprecate the existing endpoint property service in favor of this. We can still retain it for legacy clients. I would suggest we do not define any new resource-specific properties, though. This completely replaces the PID properties draft I submitted a while back. I think this is a much better approach. And any new drafts, this proposed properties would have to define the entities and how they work. And next slide. So the question is, what next? Do you like this proposal? Do you think this has merit, and so forth and so on?
Okay, so again, first maybe some technical clarification questions on the approach. Are there any? That doesn't seem to be the case. So I'm asking again the working group, who has read both of the documents that we've just seen being presented? So Wendy's and the one have been presented. Who has read these documents? So 3.5. Something like that. I know Richard has read them, so we can make it 4.5. So that's good. Still, so what I want to know is, again, maybe Wendy, you can summarize, you, the authors, and that's new information, at least to me, agree that these documents solve a different purpose, so they're not competing, right? Can you briefly explain again why that's the case, or?
Yes, mine is a replacement for the endpoint property service as defined in RFC 7285. The other proposal is new properties that would be returned by that service. The same way 7285 says, well, we define the PID property and we let we leave it to future drafts to define new properties. The other proposal is defining new properties along those lines.
Okay, so I'm just looking, what does our charter say?
Charter?
We have a charter, yes. We do have a charter and we are obliged to follow it. So it says protocol extensions to convey a richer set of attributes, right? Well, that's, I guess, that's the cost.
That is the other proposal.
Reducing of the one. Maybe continue with the discussion. I'm looking at the chart.
Sebastian Kiesel. So basically, I want to back up what you said now. It's not a question whether the one or the other draft, because they're not really competing. They are complementing each other. Right. My understanding of the charter is that Heibin and Friends draft would fit more to what the chartered work should be. But still, I think both drafts are useful and should be merged. I would also say it's difficult because there's so many attributes named there. So some of them I think are useful, some are questionable. So if we adopt Heibin's draft, we should be clear that this is not an almost finished version, but this now would then mean that the working group takes over more control and maybe discusses that some of these properties should be removed from the draft, because I think some of them are dangerous, others are very useful. What to do with Wendy's proposal, I'm not so sure about. I would really like to see this move forward. My interpretation of the charter is that it doesn't fit there. But so
actually, I'm reading the charter. The charter is not so precise in that sense, because the charter talks about protocol extensions to convey a richer set of attributes, blah, blah, blah. And then it talks about such additional information will be related both to endpoints and to endpoint costs. So related to endpoints is both of your documents, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So,
right. Well, if I might add something, I think the other proposal directly goes with the charter.
Right.
The charter says extend. My interpretation of what that said was our charter is to define new properties.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that certainly defines new properties. My proposal revises the existing definition of the service to, in my opinion, clean it up and make it more regular and make it provide it more along the lines of the cost maps and network maps. So it's an improvement to the protocol.
Right. So in that sense, you're right, Sebastian. Heibing's proposal is a more direct answer to the charter. But what I wanted to, before we continue the discussion from a chair perspective or procedural perspective, I'm happy that we have at least found agreement. So it seems we all agree that the documents are not competing, which last time wasn't clear. So that means we can obviously progress both documents, and then we need to see if we maybe next time adopt one of them. I don't think that's a good decision to talk about adoption right now, because for me, or at least for most of the working group, I assume it's now clarified what the scope of the documents are, and then maybe people want to read them again and see how what they think. I stop now, and maybe we have more comments on the mic.
So, Piotr, I went through both documents. I cannot say I read them thoroughly, but I went through them, and I think both are fall into charter. So one option would be to somehow merge this work.
No, sorry, I think we just agree we don't want to merge them. So currently we are progressing both, and potentially both can be adopted as working group items. I think that's the agreement. I see people nodding, right? That's what people in the room feel.
I just expressing what I think.
Say again?
I'm just expressing what I think.
You're just expressing what you think.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine.
And what I definitely do like in the second draft, so when this one, and is those generic views, so you can define property for anything. Regarding the first draft, there are a number of properties which are very, very specific that this draft defined, but nobody knows that there are many different deployments and use cases for Alto. So I would rather go with very generic work.
Thank you. Sabine?
Sabine, Alcatel-Lucent. I think both drafts are very important, and I think this framework, this naming framework from Wendy, is actually one of the tools that can support and that can bring into a convergence the potential multiplicity of endpoint properties. There are obviously, given the numerous use cases, potentially a lot of endpoint properties that will be proposed, and we definitely need the framework, a stable, ensure conversions to avoid overlaps and inconsistencies. So I think the second draft is actually, well, there are, I agree of the differentiation, but it is there to support and control, I would say, the evolution of the set of endpoint properties. And another reason is that there is a lot of work going on now on modeling the networks, and this also implies like a generic modeling of the properties. And there is also some work going on in the SDNRG on a generic frame semantics to model things, and this is actually going towards this direction. So I think this should be more integrated somehow in the current Alto work.
Thank you.
Hi, Vincent. Just to reply to Sebastian's comment, our draft is using the existing Alto model to convey new endpoint properties, and there are, of course, yes, it's not an exhaustive list of the so many endpoint properties. We classify them to different types of node-related properties, access network-related properties, and geolocation-related properties. And yes, maybe some of them may be removed from the near future, and some can be added in near future. I don't. Then his loss.
Sebastian again, answering to Halbin and also Piotr. Maybe it would make sense to come up with two documents. One is basically a gigantic IANA consideration section. So, dear IANA, please add the following properties to the registries with the following semantics, of course, giving some examples, introduction and stuff, but basically IANA considerations, while the other one would be like updating our Alto base protocol, deprecating mechanisms, adding new mechanisms. So I think these two things should be separate.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, just from a...
So I'm forwarding Vijay from Jabber. I think the working group more time talking about these. There can always be more than one document that satisfy a charter milestone. Whether that is the case here remains to be decided.
Alberts. I just wanted to point out, I think this directly aligns with the charter, and I'm just reading from it, right? And a quote, protocol extensions for reducing the volume of on-the-wire data exchange. So without the ability to inherit, right, our alternative is to replicate these properties across each of the endpoints, increasing the individual bloat. So I think this is
that's another angle how it tackles the charter. Yes, thank you. So I think we had some discussion here, and because we have limited time today, we need to stop it. But I think most people agree that we can proceed both documents and they are orthogonal to each other. So I know there have been other comments, Piotr, but I think most people agree on that. So I think we can progress the documents and we can have discussion on the mailing list and proceed them. And as Vijay also said, there's nothing wrong with proceeding 2 documents for the charter. But again, I would encourage people to read the documents and provide feedback, because that's absolutely important that we can have something then that the whole working group agrees on and that we can adopt these documents. Maybe that's something in general as chairs. We feel kind of reluctant to adopt a document if we say how many people have read it and 3 people have read it, right? I think you can understand. So we need really more discussion on these documents. So if we want to adopt them. Next is Hans. By the way, we are a bit behind our time. It's not as bad as you might think, because we had left 10 minutes as a backup in the end, but still I think we're 20 minutes late. So please, all the presenters from now on, try to keep it in maybe 8 minutes instead of 10. I will also, to be fair, right? I mean, okay.
I do my best.
All right. And this is the fancy looking one. Good.
So in the sense of saving time, please skip the first slide.
Okay. By the way, Hans, please stand in the purple thing, because everything you're on video.
Okay.
Yours.
Sorry.
Everybody.
The camera.
So, please skip the slide.
Okay.
So why should we compute alto maps from live network data? At first, networks are subject to change over time. So links appear and disappear. Routers are added or removed, and metrics change, and so do passes. Second, we have dynamic conditions in the network. For example, if you look at utilization or delay, they change quite often in such networks. And at third point, client always want to have live or up-to-date network information. So to fulfill all these conditions, we need to continuously update alto network and cost maps. Next slide, please. So before we can even calculate these maps, we need to accumulate a set of data. For example, routing protocols. With routing protocols, we can obtain information like routers, links, and networks or prefixes. We also take into account flow information, for example, obtained by NetFlow. With flow information, we can detect ingress and egress points in networks to see where network flows come from or where they go to. And the last point, we obtain information from network monitoring protocols such as SNMP, where we get information like utilization, bandwidth, and latency on links and generally in the network. Yeah, next slide, please. So what we basically do is we compile an internal network map from these networks. So here on this graphic, you can see a network map from a network in the US with 26 routers, and from there we have 20 and 5 our software to this network and get all this information out of this network with previously mentioned protocols. Next slide, please. So now that we have all these informations, we can start generating our alto maps. Let's start with network maps. For network maps, we provide a set of functions to generate those maps. Those functions perform usually a grouping of network elements into PIDs. This grouping can be on manifold ways. For example, you simply iterate over the routers in a network and select each router for an PID, or you can even do location grouping, so to group more network elements to one PID. We also support IP filters to exclude certain prefixes from the alto network map. Just, for example, if you want to hide your backbone network in this network map, you simply can define and filter for the prefixes of your backbone, and then they will not appear on the network map. And second, To calculate the ALTO cost maps, we provide also a set of cost functions that calculate the costs between the PIDs. Now, especially when it comes to location grouping or other groupings, which contains more routers from the network, we have several routers in one PID. So we took the passes out of the previous network from router to router. So we have many passes for one PID, and we need a tiebreaker function that decides which path we take. Such a tiebreaker function can, for example, be a simple function that selects the minimum or the maximum cost value. So, next slide, please. So this is, for example, this is an example if you do a network map by location. So you simply have some group together, for example, on the East Coast, Washington and New York, or on the West Coast, Los Angeles and San Francisco. And now if you want to calculate the cost, you have to take both routers from, for example, the East Coast PID. So you have to take the router from New York and get the pass cost to San Francisco and to Los Angeles. And you also have to take the pass from Washington to San Francisco and Los Angeles. And you simply have to select the tiebreaker function, which is the final pass cost you use for the cost map. Next slide, please. So what we basically do, we made a real-life test with this ALTO calculation. So we were attached to large European ISP networks where we found 800 routers and roughly 3,200 links, and 700,000 prefixes. From these 700,000 prefixes, we had 170,000 internal and 530,000 external prefixes. Since we also wanted to hide the infrastructure prefixes, we used our IP filters, which left us 67,000 internal prefixes, and the external prefixes were not touched. Next slide. So with this network, we created two network maps, and for each network map, one cost map based on the utilization cost function. First, we simply used one PID per router. In this network, we had 800 routers, but we only have 585 PIDs in the result. This can be easily explained since we excluded the prefixes from the backbone. These prefix and routers that only had backbone prefixes attached are not in the network map anymore, since this prefixes does not exist in our network map. Here just for an example, the size of the JSON object was roughly 10.7 megabytes, and we used a compression algorithm, and it was 1.9. Oh, I see there's a mistake. It should be megabytes, not kilobytes.
But sorry to interrupt. That means it's still compressed. It wouldn't fit on a floppy disk.
Yes,
correct.
So 760,000 prefixes, it's pretty large. And also we created the cost map based on the utilization cost function, which was 7.1 megabyte uncompressed and 770 kilobytes compressed. Then we did a second grouping per location, which reduced the number of, where we used one PID per each city we had in the network. That reduced the number of PIDs down to 99 PIDs. And the size of the corresponding JSON object was also 10.7 megabytes and 1.9 compressed. This can be easily explained. So we have less PIDs, but we have the same amount of prefixes in this network map. And since we only have up to 600 PIDs, but 670,000 prefixes, the number of PIDs has nearly no impact on the size. And in contrast, the cost map for the second, for the location-based network map, had only 84 kilobytes or 12 kilobytes compressed. So this is significantly lower than the cost map for the grouping per router. This is also pretty clear since the number of PIDs in this cost map is more than 400 PIDs less. Okay, so next. Then you can say the changes of the network maps highly depend on the chosen function. So, for example, if you create a network map based on IGP only values, for example, use group by routers or location as we did, then the changes are pretty seldom. So we had no changes at daytime and only changes during the night. And same happens when you use cost maps based on AGP properties, for example, path weight, since they are directly related. You can also see that cost map itself doesn't change that often, also only during night times and not during day times. And finally, we also made a cost map based on dynamic network properties. In this example, we used utilization, and we used the average utilization in minutes. So the network itself the utilization itself is highly dynamic, so we had to update our network, our cost map in this example, with every interval. So every 15 minutes, we had to update the cost map. Next slide. So just to wrap things up, so what we do is we optimize CD and content delivery. We gather nice live network state information to compile our network, our maps, our internal map. And from this internal map, we derive our ALTO network and cost maps. ALTO network maps are created by grouping functions. In the cost maps, we use cost functions to calculate the cost between the different PIDs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments?
Just a quick comment, Piotr. Just a quick comment. It's good to see such a presentation because for me it was obvious for many years that if you have an ALTO server that is deployed in the network, it has to be able to process full BGP table and tens of updates per second, even if you have very sophisticated rules for creating PIDs and so on. So thanks for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I also think it's very interesting, especially the size of the resulting sizes, because we had some debates on how much is there actually a need for incremental updates or not. And I mean, the sizes you were mentioning here actually give the impression, well, there is a need for maybe incremental updates, or I mean, 1.9 megabyte compressed, okay, but if you fetch it each time, or if you fetch it every 15, if 10,000 clients fetch it every 15 minutes,
creates quite some load.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, you mentioned the important thing that those updates. For me, the figure of over 500 bits. Yeah, do I remember well? Yeah.
585 bits.
Yeah. For me, it's a small number of bits. If I sometimes think about how can be sophisticated. If you take BGP prefixes, it grows, yeah, and then you have a mean number of 10 BGP updates per second. So we need updates. It's obvious.
Okay, so we are unfortunately running out of time. The only question would be, so this is from the ALTO perspective, what we call the provisioning interface. So where you basically feed information to the server, which has been explicitly excluded so far from the charter. Did you want to report here some of your interesting work, or are you proposing that we should extend the charter for this interface? Do you want to write a draft? I don't know. I'm just.
So yeah, if there's interest, we can write a draft.
But your main point is just
the
main reason was to inform the group of the work you're doing, and yes, and we were very thankful for that. Thank you. I think it was interesting. Okay, so now we have only 20 more minutes, and I think we still have 4 presentations. That's very easy. 20 divided by 4 is 5. If my brain is still working. So first comes cost. Not that one. 0?
Yes.
No, 0 is the multi-cost. Yes, correct. Go ahead, Sabine.
Okay, I'll be quick here. It's just to present the updates that have been done for the 0.0 version of multi-cost. So next slide, please. So this is multi-cost in a nutshell, but I think we can skip it. Basically, it's to return arrays of cost values, where each value of an array corresponds to a metric, and to add a logical combination of constraints that allow compromises. So the main work we have done there, we have revised the talk table of content, we removed the use cases section and replaced it with the approach. In section 4, we have added specification of the protocol extensions, the filter cost map, and endpoint cost service. And section 5 provides example for IRD and transaction. Section 6 and 7, well, nothing new because nothing applicable was added. So next slide, please. So basically, the main driver for the updates was to ensure backwards compatibility with legacy clients, which relies on the section saying that legacy auto client, when they see something they don't know, they will just ignore it. And we want any extended auto servers with to be able to process requests coming from legacy clients. For this reason, related to the cost map service, we only made the filter full cost map just can use the filter cost map just with empty source and destination list, and that's it. For the filter cost map resources in the IRD, we have removed the testable cost map field. Next slide, please. So the second type of updates was on the filter cost map and cost service extensions, where we have put a new input parameter for the request, which is called testable cost type. This is to allow a client who wants, for example, information on a metric like routing cost with constraints on another metric. So this allows this, and maybe you want constraints of hop counts, but you're not interested in the values. So next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
So here is an example that gathers all the main updates. So you have somebody willing to have a full cost map with constraints on the metrics. So no filtering on peaks. So here this is in the IRD indication. There is one field in the IRD that indicates a multi-cost capable resource, which is that max cost type that is greater than 1. So this indicates that this is a multi-cost service. So next slide, please. So now we have an example transaction. So the main updates are in the input parameters. So I want a full cost map with constraints on hop count and routing cost, but I am only interested in the routing cost values. So I use the testable cost type list for the constraints, for the metrics used for constraints, and I use the OR constraints to have compromise. And that compromise says, okay, you give me the value, the routing cost values on paths that have a quite, let's say, expensive routing cost, but a low number of hops, or a low number of hops, but then a higher number of hops, but a low routing cost. And I'm done.
I think in the interest of time we stop here. This is a working group document, so the main point is for people to read the latest version, comment, and it's up to the working group to decide how far that is from working group last call. Personally, I think this has been around, so that's with my chair hat off now, that has been around for a long time, so it's quite mature. But yeah, in order to move it to working group last call, we need comments on the latest version from people. So please read the document, and if you have any concerns, raise them on the mailing list. So we go on to cost calendar, correct?
Okay, so this is also an update in cost calendar. This time Cost calendar provides values as a each value is dependent on a time. So next slide, please. So since the last version of Dallas, we have done significant design modification to achieve two goals, or several goals. First of all, backwards compatibility with legacy clients and the second multi-cost. And also, so as to, with this design, we do not introduce a new mod, contrary to up to now. We do not introduce new media type, and this is compatible with any cost, which was not the case up to now. Next slide, please. So to ensure backwards compatibility, again, the applicable information resources are the ECS and the FCM. Next slide, please. And yeah, and this design is compatible with multi-cost extension as well. So the main updates can be seen in the IRD extension. So to ensure, with this new design, cost calendar is indicated in the IRD by a set of capability which apply each to a given information resource, and within this information resource, it applies to a given cost type. So this is the encoding as indicated in section 3.1. Next slide, please. I'll go directly to illustration. So, for example, you have a calendar of numerical path bandwidth. And so the start mode is a request date, which means that I want a calendar starting approximately from the date of my request. Each interval a time interval is 1 hour, and I have a calendar of 24 time intervals. Second example, for the endpoint cost calendar, so I want endpoint cost calendar for some metric called string service, the service states. The calendar start mode is, say, periodic. That means that it applies for calendars that are provided at regular dates, every week, every day, every month. The time interval size is 2 minutes. I know this sounds heretic, but my point is here that this tool is to be used for proactive decision making. So when calendar has a value, it gives you an interval, 30 intervals of 2 minutes. Okay, so that is 1 hour. And well, in particular, it doesn't imply you have to switch all your traffic from one path to another. This is a routing decision making. You can do it progressively to oscillation. So I have no problems with having values changing every 2 minutes, because the goal of a calendar is to allow you both scheduling your flows and not necessarily all of them, and then schedule also your request. And this is what the periodic stuff is for. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is how filtered cost map and endpoint cost service responses appear. And next slide, please, for the example. Okay, I have a hard time reading. Okay, so this is in your request to add one field. This is how calendar updates are reflected. You just add attribute calendar is true. Next slide, please. So this is how response looks like. And next slide, please. So in this example, I have requested a calendar that is updated in periodic mode. And if I read well, the value of the attribute repeat is equal to 4, and the start time is on Monday, which means that you have the same calendar value for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so you know if you request to get your calendar on Tuesday, for example, you will not need to download or request a new calendar until Friday. So that saves time for the servers as well. Oh no, yes, okay. The next slide.
Yeah, that's an obvious question. So thank you, Sabine, for your presentation. I don't think we have time for any deep discussion regarding the working group item adoption. So clearly this is a candidate for our charter item, but our charter is very broad in the sense that it says we need extensions in this space, and we have adopted the multi-cost, and this is clearly another candidate. So we need feedback from the working group if this is the right way to go, if there's too much complexity, if we want a simpler approach, or if this is just the right complexity. I think during the past meetings we all agreed that this is something very useful. That was the feedback we heard. So I don't think anybody thinks this is something. The direction is not what we want. The question is this the right level of you know, the right details that we want? So again, let's have this discussion on the mailing list because we only have 10 more minutes. We can have this discussion on the mailing list to adopt it. Maybe another thing is I can ask how many people have read the draft, the latest version. One. Yeah. So. Yeah, that makes me feel uncomfortable to ask the question. That's the point, Sabine. I would say we encourage people to read the document, and I'm happy to ask for adoption on the mailing list if we had if people had read the document and say they're fine with it, or.
Yeah, the charter items that this draft addresses is allowing to decide not only where to connect but also when.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, you're right. So it actually addresses another problem that multi-cost doesn't address. You're right. Correct. So yeah, it's definitely something we need. And actually, it is the only charter item we have for that. Only document we have for that charter item. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So we have 2 more presentations. This one, routing straight abstraction.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Well, first, I'm presenting this for Richard Yang. Any questions you have to direct to him. Next slide. Okay. So this is a quick summary of Alto. We start out with a lot of raw network state that is very large, very complex. An Alto server cooks that down, abstracts it into a small set that is exactly what a client wants and nothing more, and presents that to the client. Next slide. Okay, so in effect we have what we call a static approach. We take a big blob that represents the network, cook it down into one node, and give you one cost from, say, one endpoint to another endpoint. Next slide. Okay, this is what the network looks like inside. And you can see a whole bunch of internal nodes that are hidden in that blob. Now, normally you can ignore that, client can ignore that. But let's suppose we have a flow from S1 to D1 and another flow from S2 to D2. Each one of those flows can have 100 megabit bandwidth. But they both go through it, but they may go through the same links. And if they go through the same lengths, then they cannot both get 100 megabits. And this may be a concern to some clients because the client may be trying to do 2 streams in parallel, and they want to know that those streams really do intersect. Next slide. So in effect, the abstraction that Alto gives is maybe too abstract for some customers. Some clients want to see a little bit more detail. So the model here is that we come up with a way of the client saying, well, this is a description of how I want you to, the abstraction I want to see of the network. Do that and then give me the results. And the next slide. And that's basically another way of saying that. And here we're concentrating on routing state. And this is important because in more advanced routers, routing is not just on the source and dest IP addresses. It's also based on port and source port, dest port, and the protocol, which means that if you are concerned about sending something from one endpoint to another or to another set of endpoints, it may be if you're using UDP, it may be best to go to one server. If you're using TCP, it may be best to go to another. And if it's TCP on port 80, yet a third server might be better. Next slide. Okay, and this is basically another way of looking at that. Right now, we don't have the left-hand arrow. Alto server just gives an abstract version of the data to the application. The proposal here is the application gives the Alto server a specification of the abstraction it wants to see. Next slide. And the question now is how to specify that abstraction. There are two parts. One is a flow list that looks an awful lot like the sort of flow list you get in open flow. It's the flows that this particular client is concerned about, and basically consists of a set of tuples. The details are messy, but the basic concept is simple. And how are we doing on time?
Not so good.
Okay, next slide. Let's just skip a couple of slides here because we're running out of time. Okay, here's one example. You can see, just backup points. You can see here the two paths from S1 to S2 and S1 to D1 and S2 to D2 intersect on a couple of links. So what we want to do is allow the client to specify some sort of optimization function, saying optimize the sum of the available bandwidths between those two pairs of clients. And just go on. And just next couple of slides. Why don't you just go to the end? I don't think we have any more time. Summary. Okay. So this provides a general mechanism for allowing the client to give information on what sort of abstraction it wants to see. And the question now is the working group interested in pursuing this sort of approach?
Right. So again, the question: who has read the document? One. So yeah, that leaves me at the same comment I always do. Please read the documents and make comments. If we can only make progress if more than one person provides comment. Otherwise, we are doing standards here. It's a risk that we miss important requirements or we go in the wrong direction. So yeah, I encourage people to read the work. It fits the charter with respect to the most complex charter item we have, right? The topology extension, correct, Wendy? Yes. So it does. So it's certainly something we should be interested in. Okay. So last presentation. Ivan, it's you, right? And that is that one.
Yes, let me try to finish in 2 minutes.
You have 4.
I'm not the co-author of this document. I present for the authors. It's a scheduling hub service. The problem is that a network may have a lot of big data transfer applications, and they have duplicated functions for the application their traffic optimization, and the cross-application coordination is very difficult. Next slide. And the proposed solution is that use a scheduler between the different applications and the network controller and auto and the network itself, and implement the common functionalities here in the scheduler and provide cross-application coordinations so as to achieve better network utilization. Next slide. And the key design points are the service API, and it is simple, flexible, capture application needs. A scheduling algorithm should be able to collect and utilize network information like auto information, and able to utilize additional network capabilities like SD routing. The focus of the document is the service API. Next slide. And here is an example that assume there are two. This is a map reduce. Assume there are 10 mappers and 5 reducers. So there will be totally assumed each mapper has transferred data to each reducer, so there will be 50 transfers, but there should be dependencies. The goal of the map reducer is not to transfer only one data in the best time, but to finish all of them. Next slide. So the service API requirements are to allow applications to dynamically manage data transfer jobs and allow application to provide the basic job information and requirements and to convey the dependencies among these data transfers. Next slide. So designs have jobs, and you can directly go to slide 10. I think that is the last one. Slide 10. 10. Yes. So these are the two types of main two types of main tasks for this design. First is the data transfer task. It's for linking the DAG and it manages the basic information for data transfer, like the source destination, file size, and offset, and should reflect the performance. For example, data in time for this transfer. And another type is a sync task. It is used to describe the dependencies among these data transfers. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we're running out of time, so I will refer any discussion on this to the mailing list. We're about to close. I have one final comment. So we have a lot of people working on documents in the working group, which is good. So we do have energy, I think, but we do lack a bit the energy of people proofreading what the other guys are doing. So it's actually very simple, right? If you have 10 people who each write on one document, you have 9 potential reviewers, right? And then each document has been read 10 times. I'm kidding, but you get my point. So I think that's what we're missing here, and we have a lot of people who progress their own work. And I know everybody's very busy, but I would again like to encourage the working group to read other guys' documents and make comments. That's the way we can make progress. And maybe to the people who requested specifically working group adoption this time, I feel much more comfortable adopting items as working group items if a lot of people have read them and we had some discussion on them. If I see that apparently only 1 or 2 people have read the latest version, it's very hard to list it to it here at the meeting, right? I hope you understand. So I encourage you, proofread each other's documents, have some discussion on the mailing list, and then if everybody still agrees this is the way to go, we can adopt more items. Okay, I hope I see you all in Yokohama and maybe at the social tonight. All right.
Anyone not signed the blue sheets?
Blue sheets, yes. Has everybody signed the blue sheets?
Okay.
So we close.